Hey, good morning, everybody. Jacob, Last Stop Waterfowl Outdoors podcast. Hope everybody's having a great morning on this daylight savings morning. I know a lot of you are probably waking up and you're changing your routine this morning. Things are coming a little bit earlier to you, but I love this time of year because we get an opportunity to have some little bit more extended days, longer days, and get more stuff done with the kids, or whether it's yard work and all that fun stuff outside of hunting season. We get to take care of all that stuff and get it all done. But thank you guys so much for joining us on this new episode. This is actually episode 1 of season 5, guys. We are already now in season 5 of Last Stop Waterfowl Outdoors podcast. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate the support, guys. We never, in my wildest dreams, would have thought that we would be 5 seasons into a podcast. And now you see podcasts coming up everywhere, especially local podcasts, that type of stuff. So if you guys are joining us this morning on Facebook Live or our YouTube channel live right here, we have a special guest for you guys that we're excited to bring in with us today. And that is going to be Mr. Chet McDonald of McDonald's Taxidermy. So when I sent out, throughout the season, hunting season, I was asking for topics that you guys may be interested in as far as new podcast ideas. The word taxidermy kept coming up quite a bit, guys. And it's something that really us as outdoorsmen, whether you're a hunter or a fisherman, or maybe just looking at, educational purposes, taxidermy plays a huge part in that, and it's something that a lot of you had questions about. So this past week on our Instagram page, I sent out questions saying, hey, we're going to have Chet on the show. He has, nearly 20 years of experience in the taxidermy business. If you guys want to ask some questions, send them in. And we have, I was overwhelmed by the questions that we received this week as far as questions for Chet that we're going to get him to answer for you this morning, guys. Because I think a lot of you are interested in the taxidermy side of things, just like I am. It kind of fascinates me, but it's something that we never really have an opportunity to sit down and talk to a taxidermist and have that time to ask all the questions you may want to know. So it's something that I think we're all very, very interested in. And if you guys are tuning in on the lives right now, whether it's YouTube or Facebook, feel free to submit your questions. We can see them. We'll ask Chet. But we're going to get rolling here, guys. We're going to get Chet in, and hopefully we get a better connection than we had on the first try. And we're going to start talking about taxidermy, guys, and asking questions. So we're going to bring them in right here. Let's see if we can get them to come on in with us.
I'm in, man.
You're in. Well,
yeah.
Good. And I'm not getting the feedback on my side. So second chance, I guess, is working here on it. But Chet, thank you so much, buddy, for coming on with us on this. You're actually episode 1 of season 5. We are now entering season 5. So you're the first guest on with us, man. So thank you so much.
I'll be easy to find. So that's good.
Well, good, man, good. And like I was saying in the opening, I don't know if you could hear me, but man, what you do for I get it's a profession because you've been doing taxidermy for dang near 2 decades, man.
Yeah,
and that's something that a lot of people are kind of interested in, but never have the opportunity to sit down with a taxidermist such as yourself and kind of pick your brain and see kind of what goes into taxidermy,
Yeah, taxidermy is an interesting art, and it is an art just like painting a beautiful picture or sculpting rock or anything else is definitely an art, but the medium is a dead animal, and basically in taxidermy you're looking at taking this dead animal, which sometimes, you have your first time hunter, usually about a 7 or 8 year old kid, he brings you a duck and it's shot all to pieces. And, how are you going to tell a kid 8 years old, you don't want to be the water on his fire. So, you take that duck and can you mount this duck for me, sir? And it's his first duck. How are you going to tell him, well, son, your duck looks like the U.S. Army used it for target practice, but you just smile at him and say, "Yeah, son, that's a beautiful bird that you shot. It means a lot," and he'll look just what you imagine it'll look like, and And there's certain tricks to the trade and all to make all those little holes disappear, and you hand it back to the kid and his face just lights up. And to me, that's the most rewarding part is a customer's reaction when you hand that duck or that fish back to him, and he's like, man, that's just how I imagined it, or that's just how he was right before I shot him. And just gives you a tingling feeling all over, and it really I don't do this for a living. I work overseas. I work in the oil field for a living, and kind of started this as a side gig. And I just love that feeling when you meet a customer's expectations, and then they return with another duck or a bass that they had caught, and to be a part of them and their lives, and they bring their buddies over, and man, let me see that bass you just caught, or man, where's that black duck that you told me you shot, and the guy brings his buddies in and he tells them the story, of the hunt and all that. And I mean, the story of the hunt is a tradition that goes back. Scientists say we've been around 1,000,000 years or so. So it goes back as long as humanity does. We're all sitting around a campfire. You're telling a good story, and everybody's just, you can tell that look in their eyes where they're just gleamed in, and they're hanging on your every word, and it just goes back to that. It's part of the storytelling of the hunt. And it's just taking it one step forward. I mean, cavemen didn't have the chemicals we have now.
That's right. That's exactly right. Different times for sure. Back then, we've come a long way.
But it's at the spirit of it. It's at the spirit of the hunt. It's to have that animal preserved. Where and I've had mounts that have lasted as long as I've been doing taxidermy. So they do last a long time. It just takes a little care and a little dusting every once in a while to kind of keep them at that shape, at that trophy level, I guess you could say.
And that's a good point you make, because that's actually, as we get more into it, that's a couple of questions that were sent in are about preserving, that mount that you do, and how can you take better care of it. So we're going to delve into that, but kind of where you began. When you and I started talking, and I actually contacted you through an advertisement that you had beginning of hunting season. You were advertising taxidermy for waterfowl, and it caught my attention. I contacted you, and we started talking back and forth. And we've been talking about doing this podcast for a while now. We said we'd get together after hunting season when things kind of slowed down. But you have a pretty fascinating background, and I want the listeners to kind of understand your background, because you're right here in Geismar, Louisiana, correct? Is that where you reside at now?
Yep, that's right.
Geismar, Louisiana. But you told me something very interesting. You said, I'm actually a dual citizen. You had told me at the time. So kind of explain that and how you ended up here in Louisiana. You got a family tradition. I know your grandfather was a big outdoorsman, you mentioned, and he had, he's tied into the Atchafalaya Basin. Kind of talk about that for a second.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I was born. My father was in the Air Force, which means you're kind of in the Air Force.
That's right.
We've lived all over the world, and I grew up kind of during the Cold War, during the 70s and 80s, and our last duty station was Grand Forks, North Dakota. So that's kind of where I kind of seriously started getting into hunting. And fishing is hunting in North Dakota and fishing in Minnesota, which are, man, it's world class up there. Really? Given the chance, I would go back up there and live no problem. The winters are a little tough, but yeah, we were stationed at RAF Bentwaters in England, and of course, my mom had just came there and all, but Bentwaters was a very small base. It's a RAF base, Royal Air Force, and so they didn't even have a hospital. So I was born at Lakenheath, which is the base not too far away. During the Cold War, they had a lot of U.S. bases all across Europe. So there's all kind of small bases that just don't exist anymore. But Lakenheath is still an active base, and I believe they base F-15s there, and that's where I was born. So my first breath was of English air, and my first walk was on British soil, and I was there probably till I was about 4 years old, and then my dad got orders, and we moved to San Antonio, but when right before we moved to North Dakota, I started getting interested in hunting and fishing, and my dad would take me hunting, just the normal father son thing there. And but my dad really didn't grow up like that. My dad was kind of a city slicker, and as he says, but my mom's Cajun. She's from Avoyelles Parish, and her maiden name was Sherry. And my grandpa had died when I was about 10 years old. So my mom says, I'm not gonna have any little wussy boys growing up. Jill told my dad, you're gonna take these boys hunting and fishing, you're gonna teach them all that, because that's what my daddy would expect. So my dad, he had some friends, and he was starting to get into it, and he was enjoying it too. It wasn't just like on the to-do list.
Correct.
Exactly. Today and go out. And so my dad had a real love for the outdoors, and my mom especially. When we went on family vacations, we would go to places like Colorado, to go to Rocky Mountain National Park, because my mom always said, it's important to see animals not in a cage at a zoo, but in their natural environment. So we went up to Boundary Waters Canoe area in northern Minnesota, and that's right on the border of Canada. And the lakes up there, the water's so pure. We literally drank the water from the lake. You could see 50 feet to the bottom, and it was just, you go up there and you're camping, and everything you pack in, you got to pack out, and the rangers check you. And the place really reflects it, that you could drink the water straight out of the lake says a lot about the environment, and at night we would lay there in our sleeping bags, and you could hear the wolves, and you could really hear the wolves call, and we saw moose and everything. It was just, that's kind of how I grew up. We went to Disney World and all that, but my parents always made sure that we grew up with an appreciation of the outdoors and with the wild, and have not this cellophane store wrapped experience of the outdoors, but to go out and really be with the environment. And that's something that's never left me.
That's awesome, because she really listening to your story there, she wanted you to experience some of her growing up, it sounds like, and she realized that it was important to get y'all involved in that. And are you an only child, or did you have brothers and sisters that you hunted with? Or
I've got a brother. My brother's not into it too much anymore. I think it comes from like his job demand and everything. But there's not a hunt that I go on that I wouldn't want my brother there right beside me. My grandfather, now, he was one of the founding members of the Grand Lake Hunting Club.
I was going to ask you about that. I remember you mentioned that to me. So you have a lot of rich history in the Chapala Basin here in Louisiana.
Oh yeah. I've got a camp out in the basin, on the north end of Grand Lake, and I go out there every chance I get. Sometimes my wife says it's a little too much, but
a little bit too much. All our wives say that. I think they all feel somewhat similar. Come hunting season, especially, they don't see us, so you know how that goes. But
it's a small camp that I built on north of Grand Lake, and it's on just a real simple camp. Comfortable for two people. 3 or 4 would be kind of pushing it, but it's on state lease, and I got the lease through the state. Very simple to get a lease through the state. You just call them up and ask them they'll send you maps and everything of what campsites are available. And that's the easy part. Now, when you go down there and you start building a camp, every stick of lumber you got to put in the boat and haul out there to build the camp. So it definitely comes from it definitely comes with its challenges, and it kind of separates the boys from the men, as they say,
That's
But
right. We say we come a long way in certain ways, but when you have camps that remote back in the basin, and we have numerous families from across Louisiana that have had their ancestors build camps, or they've built camps, and really, we're like you said, the technology with that, you still got to roll up your sleeves and
and
do it the way that our ancestors did it years ago if you're going to do it nowadays.
oh yeah, yeah. But it adds a little bit of nostalgia to it. It's like when I was putting in the runners for the barrels to sit on. I know each one. I know where my grandson helped me, and I can say, man, my grandson, he put that nail in there, and I mean, my wife says I got a really good memory, but I really, the kind of things I really cherish are those memories that I make with my grandkids, and that they come along and they really enjoy the place. And when you have a camp like that, you're building memories. And a lot of people think, to have a hunting camp, it's you got to spend $100,000, and it's so expensive and all. And normally it is, but it's you just got to find, just do the research and look and dig, and you can find those leases, and when you build the camp yourself, instead of spending $50,000, I spent $5,000. So in fact, that's kind of like where all my taxidermy money all goes. Past couple of years has been going to putting into the camp, and
Yeah, yeah, and we're much like you are, Chet. We have a small. It's nothing fancy, but right along Whiskey Bay over there on the north end of the basin, and we butt up right at the Sherburne Wildlife Management area. But it's comfortable, and my boys coming up. My oldest one's 13, my youngest one's 7. Man, they absolutely love it. It's making memories every time we go there. They don't realize it now. I think my oldest one's starting to realize it a little bit more because I've talked about it. But we'll go and just hang out sometimes because it's just making memories. And we were riding out there yesterday, kind of cleaning up some stuff for the end of the season. And I looked at him and I said, "Hey," I said, "You still enjoy coming here?" And he said, "Dad, I love it." He said, "I love coming here."
Yeah.
So,
See, my wife put my grandson to the test like that one time. She says, "You really like going out there with Papa and camping and all that?" And without hesitation, he says, "Yep, absolutely."
Yep. Yes. And you've done it right at that point, Chet. You're doing something that is going to make a difference and create those memories. So it's a pretty awesome thing, man. So
it's great.
It is. But like I mentioned, man, I just find your story absolutely intriguing because you've been all over the place. You've hunted Alaska. I know that's been a big thing that you've done. You have some trips planned, you had mentioned, to go on that, and that's totally different than anybody here in Louisiana has had an opportunity to experience if you've never been. So that's pretty crazy. But really what got people interested, like I mentioned earlier, is the taxidermy side of things, man. So we're going to kind of jump in, if you don't mind. We have a list of questions that have come in. But just to kind of start off, how long have you been practicing taxidermy? Because I know I mentioned, I thought you were going on almost 2 decades. How long have you actually been practicing taxidermy?
Yeah, well, just next month have done it 20 years now.
20 years, wow.
20 years. I started out, how I started out was, I worked for Halliburton, and back when I worked in the States in the Gulf, I was driving from Cameron, Louisiana, and they had some roadkill, on the road. Okay. I won't say what animal it is because I don't want to get myself in trouble.
That's right.
But yeah, so I peeled him up, and I thought, he was still alive, and I stopped. I backed up, and no, he was fresh dead. And so I tossed him back in the truck, and I hauled him home, and I had remembered that I had actually seen a book about taxidermy at Walmart.
Okay.
So I was like, man, that'd be cool if I could taxidermy him, So I went back, bought the book, and came back, and I just started following the instructions. And the first animal I a taxidermy looked like Frankenstein, you know. My dad yeah, my dad came in and he was like, well, son, you know, he's always very encouraging to me. He's like, you know, Rome wasn't built in a day, you
That's
know.
right.
He says,
Yep.
wait, he says, you like ducks? He says, duck season is upon us. He said, just save a duck and start there. And I said, yeah, okay. He was like, you know, don't get discouraged. And this was, you know, back before when the internet was just in its infancy. And so there was a few taxidermy boards and all that I got on, and those guys are real encouraging to me. And they said, yeah, I remember my first duck that I mounted, blah blah blah. Yeah, you know, just keep going at it. You know, just keep going at it, and you'll get better. And it was, and I didn't give up. And I just, you know, the next one I got, it looked a little better than the last one, and that probably wasn't until I had probably mounted 5 or 6 ducks that I got good enough to actually start charging people.
Yeah, you had to get a little practice in first.
Oh
Little
yeah,
bit of roadkill, a little bit of roadkill practice, I guess you could say. That's pretty cool. That I wasn't expecting you to say that's how you got into it, but man, I mean, you got to start somewhere,
you
and
gotta.
just as soon start with a little fresh roadkill.
That's it. Yeah, I had done a frog too.
A
You know, I
frog.
frog. Yeah, and he had actually got stunned. You know, because most frogs on the road are flat, right?
That's right.
So, and I'd actually just take him and cast him. You know,
Hmm.
and so and then I pour it in like a latex mix, and then I put a primer coat on it, and I just started just airbrushing it and started, and after a while, man, you can get very inventive when it comes to taxidermy. You know, with taxidermy, it's not like putting together like furniture from IKEA. You know, you go step 1, step 2, step 3. You know, and everybody kind of has their way they go about doing it,
Yeah.
and they kind of stick to that success. And I've had customers that have brought me uh, ducks that they had mounted, you know, because they had shot. Like one guy brought me an old duck, and the new duck he shot, it meant a lot to him, but the bill was practically shot off. So he was
Okay.
like, man, you could take the head from this one and use it on that one, and I was like, okay, well, that's an interesting idea and all, but I've got ways to fix broken bills and stuff like that, you know, with a product called AccuSculpt. And so I just kind of left that old duck kind of in the corner, and I wasn't going to do anything with it, and it was showing its age. So just got curious, and I was like, man, I wonder how this guy mounted it. So I just started ripping the duck apart, and I looked at the dummy inside it and how he wired it, and he had actually used a fake head, and I had really never seen that before. I've always used the real uh, head,
Yeah.
and I just find it makes a nicer mount, because where anybody who's cleaned ducks will notice that there's a place where the skin stops against the bill, and what happens is a lot of times when they use a fake bill and they don't glue that real well, or they'll have excessive glue on there and all, you can tell, you know, it doesn't add to the realism, that's for sure. But some people can do it, you know, where I'm not going to get on here and hammer any other taxidermists and all, because like I said, everybody kind of has their way of doing it, and
Yeah.
people find what works best for them. And as long as the customer is happy, that's all that matters, you know?
Yeah, exactly. At the end of the day, if the customer's happy, you did your job at that point, you know. So, well, let me ask you this: what are some of the biggest misconceptions you would say regarding taxidermy? I'm sure there's a lot out there.
Well, you know, we can do a lot of things, but, you know, we're not Jesus. We can't walk on water or bring things back to life, you know? The biggest misconception, I think, is, excuse me, that people will bring in really hammered animals, you know, unless it's a kid's first duck, or, you know, with the last duck a guy's dog retrieved before he had to put him down. I actually had a customer bring in a duck that was 10 years old,
Okay.
that was the last duck that his dog had put to sleep, and he had this dog longer than he had his wife. Like when he met his wife, he still had this dog, you know.
Wow.
And so I think people will have some unrealistic expectations, and naturally, the better the condition that the animal is in, the better your mount's going to be,
Definitely, I
because
can imagine.
you can pull feathers and kind of hide holes and all that. Ducks are real easy when it comes to that. With the deer, it's a little harder because usually the holes are pretty pretty massive. You had them.
Correct.
Yeah, if he was shot at 20 yards with a 7 mag, it's in. He wants
Gonna
to
make a
pull.
dent. Gonna make a dent in them.
Oh man, yeah, it's gonna make a dent in it. But there's ways to cover that up too. But the more natural the animal looks, the better your mount's gonna turn out. A lot of times, it's important to wash all the blood off first. Not many taxidermists will tell you that, but a lot of times what happens is that blood will set in on the skin and it'll start to taint the skin. Okay, now when you throw them in the freezer, it's not a cryogenic state. It's going to continue to deteriorate in the freezer. It's just going to take longer. It slows down bacteria. You have certain bacteria that can actually survive the freezing process and continue to act on that. But I mean, you're talking about, it takes years and years and years. So for the best mount, the best way to do it is clean them off real good. Take the head, tuck it underneath the wing, and freeze them rock solid in the deep freeze. Usually a deep freeze, I don't know if anybody's measured it. I've measured it, and it's minus 40 Fahrenheit.
Minus 40 in a deep freeze. That's the average temperature.
Yeah, that's your average temperature. Well, that's the average temperature of mine anyway.
Got you. Yeah, you keep it cold. You got to.
Yeah. So you put them in there, just freeze them rock solid, and then once he's nice and frozen, then bring them to the taxidermy. If you can't do that and you want to come straight from the field, just hose him off real good, get all the blood off that you can, tuck the head, wrap him up, and try to get him as quick as you can. If you know it's going to be a couple of days or whatever, definitely freeze him, because a lot of people, they'll have a pile of ducks, and ducks' feathers are really good at insulating, so if you pile up your ducks, the ones in the middle are going to get roasted, not literally roasted, but it's going to retain the heat of all those ducks around it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah. So you pull them out and at least try to air cool him. At least try to get him. If it's a cold day, that's good. Do your hunt, do your evening hunt, and then that night bring him to the taxidermist. Good taxidermist will cut out some time for you to accept an animal, and he's gonna write your receipt and tag it and throw it in the freezer, and the more care you have and the quicker you can get it to the taxidermist, that's the better off you're going to be. Definitely.
That makes a lot of sense. There you go, guys. That probably answers some of your questions right in the question. Let me ask you this, Chet. I know you don't do this, it's not a full-time job because you have a full-time job, obviously, but how many animals do you mount on average in a year right now, not nowadays? What's
Oh man,
you have to estimate?
I got one customer. He's a repeat customer, and he brought me a load of about 10 birds, and some of them were pheasants, some were ducks, and he came and brought them to me. I would say in a given year, I probably do about 100 ducks a year.
100 ducks a year. And then you do everything. You do fish and other animals as well.
Yeah, I don't do deer yet, just because I've been so busy with ducks. People have been pretty happy with my work. So kind of a lot of it is spread off word of mouth. I do it here in my house, so I don't have a shop out, with the billboard and all that, But I definitely always looking to expand my knowledge and expand my, the services I offer.
Definitely.
But I do ducks, I do squirrels, I do fish right now. I've had some big ones come in. I do a lot of restoration work where a guy brings me a sockeye, and it was a big sockeye, and he had actually caught this fish with his grandfather.
Oh wow!
And it had been at the camp. Well, everybody knows you're not always at the camp. You don't always have somebody at the camp. and what happened was just over time, the fish started deteriorating, and it had it with the mouth open, and on a sockeye, the skin around the mouth is paper thin.
Correct.
And so it started having holes here. It looked like a rat had ate out the head, and he was cleaning up. Yeah, it had deteriorated. Just time is not kind, So
correct.
He pulled it off the wall, and he was just going to throw it out. And he had seen my advertisement for restoration work on mounts. So he called me up and he said, "Hey man, he sent me some pictures, and he said, can you do something with it?" I said, "Absolutely." So he brought it in, and I just started reconstructing the head, and then reconstructing the mouth and everything, and gave a good primer job. And just with my airbrush, I just started taking my time with it, and it came out absolutely beautiful. And he was really happy with it. He was almost moved to tears because his grandfather's not around anymore, but the mount's still around.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, that type of story. I mean, he was able to bring back that little piece of his grandfather. You were able to restore it for him. That's awesome, man. That's amazing. You could do that.
That's what I really like doing. I like being a part of it. I mean, nobody's going to do taxidermy for free, but
Correct.
that is, you bring the money in, and the money goes out, and I can't tell you where I've spent all the money, but I could tell you I could tell you stories like that, and that's the things that really mean a lot.
And that's what you remember. That's right. That's exactly right. Well, I got a listener question here, actually. So this is pretty interesting, and I think a lot of people would like to know this. He says, what would you do if you suspected that a client had acquired an animal through illegal means? Do you run into that?
If a client brings me a bird that's a legal bird during the season and has a story about it, I'm not the game warden. The game warden's got to do his own work.
Good point.
And I mean, if a guy brings me, like, I can't take in more than from one client, I can't take in more than I'll never, like, if it's hunting season, the guy brings me in 12 ducks, or let's say 14, right?
Yeah.
I by law, I have to ask him where he shot them, if he shot them, on what day did he shoot them, where he shot them, and all that. And all that has to go on the tag, and it's got to be put on the duck and put in the freezer. I'm not a wildlife investigator. Now, if the wildlife and fisheries, if they've got somebody that's under investigation and all, they come in here with a warrant. There's not much I can do about it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. I mean, I didn't know if there's a normal procedure where all the taxidermists in the state maybe get a visit each year. If you have to. Is there something on record to where they visit you, or they have to have calls to come and visit you? Because we've always heard that. I've always heard that a game warden has more power than state police. Typically, they can come into your home and search your home without a warrant. That's pretty impressive power. Is that a state game warden, or does it have to be a federal game warden? How does that work?
I'm not sure how it works, but I know, in 1781 or whatever, I know they passed the Constitution, and I know they don't have more power than the Constitution of the United States. So
that's a good point. Very good point.
If they come in and they want to search my home, they're going to have a warrant. I mean,
gotcha.
That's just my sister-in-law. She's an attorney, and I've asked her quite a few of these types of questions, and her answer is pretty much the same as mine. They can't search your home without a warrant. If you're out driving around and you got ducks, well, that's a totally different deal. But all my ducks are tagged, and who shot this one and who shot that one and all, and there's no like possession limit for a taxidermist or anything like that.
That was another question I was wondering. Do you have so many you could take in within a year, or however that works? But
no, as how many my freezer can hold.
There you go. That's right. How big the freezer is. So
Oh yeah. I try to do. I try to skin them out and all. But I'll tell you what. For the first time, I won't name any names, but for the first time the other day, I had this kind of guy want to have his cake and eat it too. He came in and I noticed the duck was kind of light, and I was like, that's a little weird. So I put him in the freezer. I took the deposit from him, took all his information and all, wrote him text him his receipt and everything. And so I started. I'll usually take out 3 or 4 ducks to skin at a time, and you can skin them out and then put them back in the freezer, and it saves you space in the freezer because you can kind of roll them up at that point.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so when I opened him up, he had already breasted the duck out.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and then sent me what was left, and I said, "Yeah," and I said, "Hey man, what happens is when you do that, what happens is, of course, it's a bloody mess, right? So what happens is that blood sits on the skin, and it taints the skin, and what happens is the feathers can start falling out." Because it's just like hair, right? If you've never seen a dead animal on the road, right? It was the first thing to go is all the feathers, all the hair starts falling out, and feathers are a lot like hair. Okay. When you burn, I don't know if anybody's ever singed birds, but when you singe a bird, the smell is exactly the same as if you singe the hair.
That's right. Growing up in like what you said, your mom grew up in a Vols parish. I grew up in Evangeline parish, and we pot roasted up hundreds of ducks over my lifetime. Growing up as a kid with my dad, and I remember that smell as a kid, and you never forget it. It smells like burnt hair. That's a very good comparison. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. So I sent them a little message, trying to be as nice as I could. I said, well, I can't guarantee, this duck. I said, it might mount, it might not mount. And he's like, well, do what you can with it. He said, I just didn't want to waste the animal. And that's perfectly legit. I mean, you don't, especially if you raise like I was, you don't kill anything you don't intend to eat. And so, they kind of have this view of the taxidermist, just skinning them out. You take the carcass and you toss it, and that's pretty much what you have to do, because if I gave meat back to a customer and then he got sick, man.
Correct. You'd have some trouble on your hands at that point.
Yeah, I would. So a lot of times, I don't take a chance with it. I toss it. But I mean, as sportsmen, man, we spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on this sport. It isn't. I don't really consider it waste when you pull one duck out of the thousands of ducks that you've killed and have it mounted. In a way, it's the opposite of wasting, because that animal is going to be around for a long, long time on the wall.
Yeah, definitely.
Passed down after you die, and they, your grandkids to display it. They say, man, that's my grandfather shot that bear, or he shot that deer, or he shot that duck, and it adds back to that. I always go back to the tradition of hunting stories,
Correct. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, Troy Fontenot sent in a question. He says, ask Chet the proper way to store a squirrel or duck before mounting, which we kind of touched on ducks. But what about like squirrels? You talked about squirrels. I know a lot of us growing up in Louisiana, we have a lot of squirrel hunters out there. So squirrels, trying to preserve it. What's the best way, Chet?
Yeah, squirrels aren't too bad. The problem with a duck is a lot of times if you freeze him where his neck is out like this and his body's here. A lot of times, when you put it in the freezer, you're going to have more ducks, more animals you put on top of that. If it's in a bad position, man, you freeze them so hard, the neck could actually break off. So I always take the neck and tuck him underneath the wing. So it's more like, it's more like this instead of like this, and then you can stack other ducks on top of it. and it just makes for a better mount. Squirrels are a little different. I usually tuck their little arms and legs in like that and try to roll them up like that, and then just put them in a Ziploc bag, and kind of like if he was cuddled up sleeping,
Okay.
and that protects his legs for the same reason, is it could snap off. Squirrels are a little more resilient because the skin is tougher than a duck's.
Yeah, it's thicker. It's got more of a thick coat to it.
Absolutely, yeah. It's definitely thicker. It's a little more resilient. The process is almost the same for a squirrel, but it's different just because of the quality of the skin and everything.
Yeah, it's different than a duck. So
yeah.
Dustin Jumonville asked. He said, after you receive your mount back, what are some of the best tips for proper care to preserve it?
Dust it off. If you get like the old feather dusters that you see in movies, that's the best thing in the world. And when I dust it, I don't just simply dust like that. You kind of put a twirl in, and what it does is those feathers. And nothing cleans feathers like feathers, really.
Really?
And it'll kind of get the dust out of the in between the feathers and all. And man, you'll notice a difference right away. It just seems to brighten right up. And yeah, that's what I would say. Definitely a feather duster. And
so no sprays. You don't want to be spraying anything. Just basically dust it. Keep it. What about sunlight? Like exposure to sunlight, possibly through a window or any of that type of stuff. Does that affect it at all?
It does. Yeah, that'll fade it. But that goes back to your selection of where you're gonna display it. A lot of people, their trophy room or their living room is naturally just a sunlit area. I wouldn't go boarding up the windows just to save your mounts. But just try to keep them out of direct sunlight. That will fade the colors, because when you get a big mallard like that one on your wall, man, that's a nice mount.
That's an old mount. That is from the 80s, Chet. That's an old one, man.
Take good care of that mount. I see your dead mount. That's the mount that started getting popular in the 90s, and I do a lot of them. That's a beautiful mount. A lot of people think of a gray duck as something boring and kind of like drab colors and all.
Yeah.
But man, it is a drab colored duck, but man, that white on his wings just makes it pop.
The more gadwall we kill each year, I thought you see some beautiful stud gadwall here in Louisiana. We blessed, and I've always thought it's a beautiful bird. Widgeon, that teal that you see behind me, for those of you watching right now, this one right here, or let me move right here. That's an old one, Chet, too. That one wasn't. That was probably one of the first mounts we got as a kid that I remember, and it was done locally by a guy by the house, and it's shown some wear over the years, but it's a cool conversation piece, and it's one of those things. It's a memory, growing up as a kid, killing, and pretty, it means something to me, even though it's not one of my best mounts that I have in my possession. It's still one of those things that's a great memory I have,
Beauty really is in the eye of the beholder,
Good point.
Yeah, and I like how you did all your pictures around, and that's what it's all about. That's what hunting's all about.
It is, man. When we were looking at heading into 2022, my wife helped out, my son Jackson and my youngest one helped out, and we said, hey, we're going to be in the studio, we're going to touch it up, do some things, and this is what they came up with. I have to say, I have to give them credit. For the most part, they came up with it. I take the pictures, and then they did the interior design on everything. So
looks great. Yeah,
well, thank you, man. It turned out pretty good, so I'm happy with it. But
your shelf where you got your box of shells and all that.
Yeah, got the shells. We got a bunch of different duck calls. I got some of the old Yitzen duck calls. A little bit of everything. Some old Fox Cane calls. I got some Bayou Beast calls. I got a couple of Beaver Creek. I got a little bit of everything up there, so I'm gonna keep adding to that. My wife, that was actually one of the pressures. She said, you need a shelf with some duck calls. She said, when you're in the studio and it shows up, which my big head is in the way and my broad shoulders in the way. but it's still pretty cool. It does look nice.
Yeah, it looks gorgeous. Yeah, I have a lot of requests I have is what they call habitat bases. Where
Okay.
you got a shelf, with a piece of, just like you got there, and they want a place where they can display um, pictures and all. But usually I'll go out and get like the storm knocked down a lot of fences, and so I'll take that fence material and I'll make like a barn door for the back, and I'll hang a dead mount there, or they want him flying or something like that, and I always add in a shelf on bottom, and so they can put on their
Whatever
pictures,
they want to add to it.
whatever they want. They want to put the brass, or sorry, the shells from the very shells that they kill that duck with. That's real popular too.
Yep. I want to do one of those. I think my buddies called it a box mount or something like that's what they called it. But I'm going to get you, when I get one of those special birds, I'm going to get you to do that for me. I want to add that to my collection. So, well, hey, continuing with the questions. I got a ton of questions, so hopefully you don't mind answering them. But our Nate sent in a question. He put, "What is harder to mount, a deer or a duck?" Which I know you mentioned you don't get too much into deer, but you
Yeah.
probably have an idea what goes into it. So, in your opinion, what's harder?
Yeah, definitely deer. I mean, I haven't done deer, but I know the process. And
Is it because of the size? It's so much harder, is what it is.
well, there's more to it. Like, okay, so on a duck, usually you only got the head facing one side, right?
Okay.
So you only got basically one eye is going to be showing. I mount them just with both eyes in it, but as a hunter, we have our eyes mounted straight on the front of our head.
Yeah.
And deer are a little different. They're not quite like a cow, but they're not quite like us. And
Correct.
when you walk up to a deer mount, a deer head, the first place your eyes go is on their eyes. So the eyes have to be fixated perfect. If it's off, it's going to be off, and you may not even consciously register that in your brain, but you're going to go straight to the eye. So you got the eye address. You've got, a lot of times I hear from other taxidermists that the cape, cape, when they cape it out, a lot of times they cape it too short. So, they don't have, you don't have as much as that neck, especially if you killed it like during the rut, and you killed it during the rut, and the neck is big and thick. If the taxidermist doesn't get that dummy that's in rut, you're going to have a big disappointment. You're going to look at it and say, "Man, that neck was bigger than I imagine it was bigger." So there's a challenge with them, and on a deer, I know it's very vital to get your measurements, because once you bring it to the taxidermist, it's going to be caked out. Most of the time, people are going to take the neck for a neck roast, and they're gonna bring just the head with the cape over it like that. So you got to get a good measurement. Getting really good measurements on a deer is vital to it. So
a lot more detail. It sounds like a lot more. Detail. That's the easiest way to say it, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and when you get up close to the mount, everybody starts looking at it. See, oh man, where's the stitching? Where's this? They start looking behind it. When I give a customer, it never fails. When I give a customer a mount that had a little girl, and I get very few African American customers, and I really wish I got more, because man, those guys enjoy the outdoors just as much as me.
No doubt.
And those guys catch some big fish, But I don't know.
Hunters too, Chet, because we're starting to see more come into the sport now of waterfowl hunting. Especially waterfowl hunting. That's something, like I follow the guys outside the not outside the levees. There's a group on social media right now that I kind of followed throughout hunting season, and it's two friends that hunt together, and Out the Mud Outdoors. That's what I was trying to think of. I get those two names confused.
I'll write that
those guys are huge in the waterfowl hunting. And I watched the story on them talk about how they wish they would have got into it so much earlier. Man, I mean, you're starting to see it more and more, and that's awesome. It's more people coming to the sport, you know?
Yeah, you do. All races, all walks of life. You're starting to see more women get involved in it too, which is
huge.
Excellent. That's huge. Back to the story. They had a little girl. She came and brought me a fish. It was a 5.5 pound bass that she caught on a little Zebco Barbie. I think it was a Barbie rod and reel, you know. And I said, "You caught this fish?" "Yes, sir, I caught this fish." And I said, "Okay, how do you want him?" And she told me she wanted him with his mouth open. And I said, I'll have to send you the picture of it. And I said, okay, you know. And then, man, it was a huge bass. I've never even caught a bass this big, okay? And, you know, got in the freezer, skinned it out, and treated it, and mounted it, and painted it, and everything. And when I got it back there, man, her eyes are about this big. She was just so happy. And I almost cried, you know. And I said, "Can I take a picture of you for my business and use your picture?" Because her mom was there. I said, "You don't mind, dear?" Because, you know, people are funny about kids, you know, taking pictures of kids. So she said, "Yeah." So I took the picture of her, and man, that bass is almost as big as she was. You know, she was probably about 7 or 8 years old. And I said, "That's my youngest client ever." So
that's awesome. That's a good story, and you're gonna remember that little girl for a long time, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. I'm you know, when I'm really like hinging on doing this into retirement, you know, retirement. So I've got a picture saved, and I'll, you know, blow it up and frame it and put it there. My wall space is limited right now, but you know, it's just a great picture, and she was just so proud of that fish, you know.
That's awesome. That's a great story.
And then too, it's like, you know, when you have positive reinforcement from grown-ups and adults, you know, it encourages her to keep on, you know, fishing, just to continue to enjoy it. You know?
That's right. I mean, that may propel her into the future being an outdoorsman, you know, until she has kids and grandkids, you know.
That's right.
So that's an awesome thing. We have a comment. I don't know. Can you see this on the screen? It's from Blake Ribeye Benoit. It says, "An underrated duck is a doughree in full plume."
Oh man, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Doughree is, you know, some people call them blackjacks. You know, that's a common name for them, especially in
Louisiana. We grew up calling them in Evangeline Parish blackjacks. You know.
Yeah, and any diver duck, they're a little harder to mount because they don't quite get as fatty, I don't think, as a mallard. You know, a mallard's been sitting in the rice field eating and getting bigger. You know, they get fatty. But doughree, you know, they're absolutely gorgeous birds. You know, and there's slight differences between that and a ringneck. You know, and you really got to know ducks to really know the difference.
That's right. A lot of people get confused on them. You know, even as long as I've been waterfowl hunting, they still confusing sometimes when you kill them, you know, out in the field.
Oh yeah. It's especially like until I started doing taxidermy, the difference between a canvasback and a redhead is like a small canvasback can look just like a redhead.
They do, especially the young ones.
Yeah, the slope of for me, the slope of the bill.
Yeah.
Definitely tells the difference, and a redhead's got a different colored bill altogether.
Correct.
But yeah, he's absolutely right. They're just beautiful, you know, especially when they're flying tight in a tight formation.
Oh yeah,
they're wrapping around your blind like that. You pull up on them, you don't know which one to shoot first. You know that. You know, you think, I'm just going to shoot right in the middle of them, but man, you can't kill them like that.
You change the limit on them, so they're over the last 2 seasons they put a pretty strict limit on them. So you got to be careful. That's a bird now here in Louisiana will get you in trouble with Mr. Green Jeans pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's Mr. Green Jeans. I like that one. It is. He's absolutely right. You know, in full plumage, man, they're a beautiful bird. Probably the only one.
Got that Last Stop Waterfowl advertising right there on the bird.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. I love all those stuff like that you can order, man. There's a whole industry behind that. But
Oh, they're making their money. Don't worry.
yeah, there's to me, there's not an ugly duck out there. You know, they're all unique and they
I
all.
agree.
I've seen now. I take it back. I have seen some hybrids. Now hybrids are unique to themselves, but man, they can have some ugly hybrids out there.
Really?
Make you want slap one duck,
Oh
you
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
for,
Yeah.
for screwing the other duck to say, "Hey, what the hell are you thinking?" You know.
That's right. That's exactly right. And that's something that they're gonna bring to you because that could be a once in a lifetime
Oh,
opportunity to have a hybrid. You know.
yeah, because you look at them and you're like, you kind of just you wonder like what two ducks made this.
Yeah.
Like, you kind of like have an idea, but in the end, you never really know.
You
It's
never really know. That's right. Well, another question from a listener here. Grant Terrier sent in a question. He put, "What's the hardest and easiest duck to mount to display at its full potential?" It's a good question, I thought.
I'd say, yeah, it is. That's a great question. Probably a wood duck. Wood ducks don't get too fatty. Where a lot of the work comes in taxidermy is you're taking um, if it's late season, not, or sorry, early season, and they fattened up
Yeah,
to fly south, is getting all the fat off of it. You
that's the
know,
toughest part of it.
yeah, because the fat gets real close to the skin, and you want to get all the fat off. But and they make machines for taxidermy that it's like a wire brush, and it's
Okay.
set at a certain speed, so you don't rip the skin, but you end up ripping the skin sometimes.
Do you?
You got to sew it back together and all. So I find the easiest way is just an old fashioned pair of scissors, just cutting the fat off of it. Cut, 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 cut.
Yeah.
But then again, you don't want to get too aggressive with it because you can cut a hole in it too, and then there your back ducks are forgiving because the feathers hide a lot, you know.
Makes
And
sense.
yeah, but you can a lot of if it's a big enough hole, it affects the way all the feathers lay, you
Okay.
know, because with ducks, you'll notice, especially when you pull them off the water and you first kill them, if it's an area that you haven't disturbed with the pellets, all the feathers are laid. Because if you watch a duck, they're constantly preening their feathers. They're constantly get them in perfect alignment because when the feathers are off alignment, it creates more drag. So the duck knows his aerodynamics, and he's going to try to preen those feathers perfectly.
That's amazing. You know, that's just Mother Nature, I guess, taking course there. But yeah, I mean, he knows what makes it easier for him to fly from Canada down to the Louisiana Gulf Coast, I guess, and back up.
And especially like right when they're towards the end of the season where they're starting to pair up, they're like a 16-year-old on the prowl. You know, they're trying to preen their feathers just like they're trying to, believe it or not.
Gel their hair or whatever. They prune themselves. They want to look good for the ladies.
That's right. They got to catch them. They got to catch them a partner when they fly back up north.
That's exactly right. And you're seeing it now because we still got birds down right now that I've seen lately, and they're all pairing up. We have community ducks here at the pond, and they doing their thing. They're just doing their thing. It's that time of year. Makes a lot of sense though. So
you're seeing a lot more the tree ducks.
Yes.
Around Baton Rouge, and they seem to vacate during duck season. You don't see them around during duck season, but after duck season, I think they summer up here.
It's crazy, Chet. That's something that we've talked about on previous episodes. Used to you'd see them early season, till season. You'd see them. You had to be careful because they were around big numbers during till season. And then, like you just mentioned, you wouldn't see them during big duck season hardly, and then they'd return after the season. Well, that's kind of changing a little bit now from being out in the field and hunting over the last couple of years. We're starting to see, the whistling ducks stay a little bit more during big duck season now down here in Louisiana, and even some of them staying year-round now. There's areas that we'll run into that in the off-season fishing we'll see them, which is kind of something that's changed over the years. So that they're starting to become more accustomed to staying down here year round or longer during duck season than they used to, for sure.
Yeah, there's something very different about them because I mounted one this year. A client brought one to me, and when I started skinning it out, it had no fat on it.
Really?
No, no fat. Even wood ducks will have a little fat, especially like right around the wings.
It's all
Uh,
legs and feet on a whistler, pretty much.
yeah, they don't really fatten up, so it makes sense that they go further south during duck season,
Yeah,
and their feather construction is real different too. They're
really.
not, yeah, they're not like a normal duck.
I tell you
They,
what, I don't know if you've ever eaten them for table fare, but they are phenomenal table fare.
I've never had one. Are
It's
they
very
good? Huh?
good. It's very good, and more guys now, since we're seeing more here in Louisiana,
Mhm.
you're starting to see guys talk about how they're excellent table fare now. It's a good
Yeah,
eating duck. It really is.
yeah. I think the only duck I never mounted yet was a poodoo.
A pool do, yeah, which is super common down here, in Louisiana. Everybody, they either pass on them or all the boys below I-10, they cooking them in a gravy or eating them for table fare. So,
Yeah,
but
I like gizzard. The gizzard got a big gizzard on
yeah,
them like that,
oh
and I
yeah,
like gizzards, man.
they're well known for the gizzards. So yeah, they are good table fare. We got another question. Chaz Messina sent in. He put best mount options for a dead hanging mount. Do you hang it by the feet or by the neck?
I think I've done it both, and I think it's just what the client wants. A lot of times it goes back to the duck blind. When you hang the ducks up in the duck blind, if
Yep.
you've done it the same year over, if you've done it the same way over and over, in your mind, you've kind of imprinted. Okay, it's supposed to be hanging from the neck because that's the way it hangs in my blind, and that's the way they want it. But yeah, I really like the way you got your dead mount there. That's kind of the way I hang mine. Is I'll put a loop around the feet
Yep.
and put it up like that. I find because reason why I do it like that is if I have one that I say, man, that's full plumage, man. I think I'm going to save that and mount it for myself, and then put it in the freezer. If you do it from the neck, it kind of messes up those feathers of the neck, and you
Yeah,
start to,
I could see that where you'd have that little, kind of rubbing on the neck. The feathers are flopped up a little bit. That makes
yeah,
sense. So I like the way this one turned out. It was done by a local taxidermist here in Ascension, and it came out good. It came out good. I was very happy with it. I have to say, you know. But
yeah,
that was a good question, Chaz. I like that. Hang by the neck. I don't know if I've seen one by the neck that I could remember, but I always see the hanging mounts typically by the feet. Is what I see.
yeah. They tend to, when you put them on a lanyard by the foot, a lot of times they tend to slip out a little more, So
Gotcha.
yeah, so for utilitarian purposes, I'd put it by the neck, but for a, for a dead mount, probably go by the foot.
By the foot.
What else is, and a lot of times everybody does it. They're going through the internet and they find a picture. They're like, man, I really like that mount or whatever. That helps a lot too. Send that to your taxidermist.
Yep.
It helps meet expectations because you may describe something to the taxidermist, just by word of mouth, or you type it out or whatever. You want it a certain way, and then he picks up on that maybe a different way, and then excuse me, and then
Yeah.
when you get it, there's nothing worse than a
The
client that's.
expectations not being met there because you had different visions of it.
So if you send him a picture of what you want, he'll uh, he'll
Duplicate it.
try to duplicate that and meet the expectations. Yeah.
Well, I got a fishing question. Blake B sent in a question. He put, "What's the biggest bass and sac-a-lait that you have mounted?"
Well, I've done probably some fin work, some reconstruction I did on some fish. Now I didn't mount them; they were really old fish. Like I
restored them.
restored them. Like the sockeye, the guy had caught with his grandfather. That was a massive one. He had to go 2 pounds at least. I mean, it was a huge sockeye. And the guy, I did a bass for a guy. He had caught a big 12-pound bass in Lake Okeechobee,
Okay.
and that was also a restoration job. But probably the largest fish, probably that 5 pound I did for that little girl. You
Yeah,
know,
that's
that was
big. That's big.
oh, it's a massive fish. You know,
That's a big project. A 5 pound bass.
yeah, and really, I charge a flat rate for fish, no matter how large or small it is, because really, in the there's a little price difference in the dummies. The bigger it gets, you know, I mean, for redfish, you do 24-inch redfish is one thing, but I did a 65-inch redfish, and I had to charge a premium for that.
Yeah,
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 it was
much bigger fish.
that's the largest fish I've ever done. And there was two of them. A guy had caught these two huge bulls, one for his wife and one for him. And in fact, it was a guy who had the camp. Uh, he's got a camp not far from my camp, and I did two for him like that. You know, I gave him a little discount because he was bringing me two big fish, you know. But everybody always wants to know price, right? Price. And some people charge per inch, but I just charge a flat rate, really, because there's not much of a difference. It's a little more work to do a bigger fish than it is a smaller fish. But then once the fish gets down so small, then it's more work than a large fish, because you're having kid brings you a brim this big.
Yeah, correct.
You got to get it there literally with a surgical scalpel to try to get everything out you can, because when you soak it in chemical, you know, that's what preserves it, right? But that chemical will preserve soft flesh, but it doesn't do quite as good of a job as just removing the soft flesh from the skin. So small fish, I might even charge a premium on small fish, because it is like
it's much more difficult to work on.
Oh yeah, because behind the cheek, you've got meat behind the cheek, so you got to get in there from this side and clean it out. You got to go inside. Yeah, try to get out as much as you can. Yeah.
Yeah, it takes patience for that. I would make a horrible taxidermist, I can tell you, if it came down to that type of stuff.
Yeah, it does. And what you do is, you know, I try not to get frustrated. When I get to the point when I get frustrated, I just stop. I roll it up, put it in the bag, and toss it in the freezer. And
Simple enough. That's a good idea.
I'll deal with that another day, and I do. And then, you know, I try not to, when I'm working on taxidermy, it's not something I do every day. If I don't feel like doing it, I won't do it, because well, the results will be a reflection of
your mood or temperament that day. I could definitely see that. You know, I could see that definitely playing a factor into it. I'll say that.
Yeah, it is an art, and I try to work on it when I'm in a real good mood, and I'm like, man, I want to do some taxidermy. I got some good ideas, or okay, I see how I'm going to get around that problem, and I'll pull it out and work on it. And you know, it's not just something that, you know, the statue David wasn't just cranked out. You know, that was a labor of love, and taxidermy is no different. You know, like I say, instead of working with rock and marble and paint and all these things, you're working with a dead animal, and you're trying to make it look alive.
That's right. At the end of the day, you're trying to make it look alive. That's difficult. Yeah. That can be difficult.
It can be.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it can be, because people's expectations are real high, and it's nice when you can meet those expectations real high. Some people's expectations are completely unrealistic. You know, it's, you know, damaged feathers. That's a big deal. You know, I try to hide as much as that, but there's no product on the market that you could smear on there and make a broken feather look
natural.
Yeah, and if you got just one or two feathers that are bad, you can actually just pull those feathers and spread the rest out to kind of cover where that missing feather is, and you never know it was missing, you know. But then sometimes you get them where it's lots and lots of feathers, and you just have to call the guy and say, "Hey, man, look, you got a lot of damage on this bird." You know,
can't make it happen, but I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to mount him. I'll give him to you, but you know, just be ready mentally. You know,
give them a heads up, kind of let them know what to expect. And that's really, as a client, that's all you can really ask for, you know, because they know, Chet, they know they shoot this bird and they get it. And it may be a bird of a lifetime for them to kill, that they want to have mounted, but they know it's damaged pretty badly. So going in, you kind of have that in the back of your mind that, hey, I hope he can work a little bit of magic, but at the end of the day, you kind of have a realistic, hopefully, idea that it may not work out like I want it to, So, but look, I know we're just over an hour now, so I've taken up enough of your time, especially on a Sunday. But I have one question in closing that I do want to ask you. How do you think the public, in today's society, the way things are, it's crazy out there. How do you think that the public perceives taxidermy?
Well, I don't think that they really perceive taxidermy in a negative way. I think it's because taxidermy is a product of it's a trophy, and they love to attack trophy hunting, but that's people that say these kind of things are kind of ignorant of it. Anything can be a trophy from a hunt. You could have just a shed that you found from a deer that's on your lease that that's the big one. You've been seeing him in the pictures. He dropped his shed, and you want to preserve that.
Yeah.
A trophy can be your hunting license. Maybe you had a loved one that died that you hunted with, and man, you find their old hunting license. That's a trophy. It could be a picture. It could be anything from the hunt that represents that hunt as a trophy. And a lot of people think that, as hunters, we go out and we, go out to maim and kill animals specifically because we want a bird on the wall, or you want a pelt from an animal. You don't want the skin, or you want the antlers or something like that. And that's it. But anybody who's a normal person and hunts knows that a trophy is just simply a memoir from the hunt, that you take home, and as a taxidermist, you try to preserve that the best we can, and meet a client's expectations.
That's right.
That's what it's all about,
That's it. Preserving those memories, like we talked about, and it's not just about the kill. We always say that, and
right.
Educational. What we do in podcasts nowadays, and we're talking about these subjects, getting out there and talking to them. Whether it's you're a YouTube creator, or social media, all that stuff. It's all about educating everybody on it. It's not just about the kill. That's for sure.
Yeah, I've got I've got several trophies from hunts that I've taken, and I've got the skin. A lot of people, they pull the skin and it goes out with whatever you debone. You leave the bones behind and they throw it out. But I've got the skin from my first deer I ever killed. And I've got, I went up to Alaska in 2019. I killed a really nice black bear, and I did I cleaned the skull, and I got the skull mounted. And on a black bear, that's what you that's what you measure for. Like with whitetail, there's a certain way you measure the antler.
Yeah.
Well, with black bear, you measure the skull.
Okay.
And you come up with a point system. It's real simple. You measure the width at the widest point, you measure the length at the longest point. You add the two together, and you get a score in inches. So I've got one, I think he measured out at 16 3/4, which is much larger than average bear. And I've got it displayed. I built a real nice cutout of the state of Alaska, and I've got the skull hanging on there, and actually took the topographical map of the area that I hunted, and I printed it in reverse, and then I put the Elmer's glue on the board there, and I put it down, and man, like magic, it transferred and everything, and I scraped all the old.
That's awesome. That's a great idea.
I've actually got his penis bone on there, and I got the shell, I got the bullet, I got my license on there and everything. I got it displayed in my taxidermy room, and I've got the skin I got back from the tannery. I've got everything. My grandson, he wanted a claw,
Yeah.
for a necklace. So I pulled that out, and there's like there's some material inside the claw, you know.
Yeah.
So I
Yep.
pulled that out where it was just a shell, and I made him a nice piece of jewelry for him, and
That's
he's
awesome.
still got it. He's 13 years old. He hasn't lost it yet, so I guess it meant something to him.
Heck yeah. Yeah. If he's holding on at that age to it, it meant something to him.
He's
So,
holding on to it, and you know that's several trophies I got from one hunt, you know, and hopefully I'll take him back there, and I'll take him there before we go salmon fishing up there, and he really wants to go back and kill himself a bear. So I said, man, I know the spot. I think it took me like 45 minutes from the time I left the cabin to the time I had a bear down. It was only like 45 minutes.
wow.
Yeah, it was an easy hunt. It was like shooting fish in a barrel.
Really?
Yeah, it was a great hunt, and it's just a really beautiful place. And if you ever watch the Meat Eater
Yeah. We
series
do.
on Netflix, where I rent that cabin is about, as the crow flies, it's probably about 20 miles in Alaska.
In Alaska, terminology.
Like next door, right? But
Yeah, correct.
it's on the same island he hunts, and it's just a very special place for us. I got a buddy of mine, Brock Beal, and we were going back up there, different part of the state. We're going to go caribou hunting.
Oh,
this year.
wow.
Yeah, and so I've got my caribou tag. I've got my flights booked.
You ready?
Man, I'm ready. I'm
You
ready.
ready to go?
We'll kill us a big one, and we kind of had to do a little different because all the outfitters are booked up until 2024.
Okay.
So we started digging around on the internet. How do you do this without a guide and all? And we got everything set. So we kind of got around the whole guide system and all that. And man, it made it a lot more economically.
Oh, I can imagine.
Oh yeah. Because we were looking at a guide. A guide was like minimum $3,000.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
you just did it you figured out a way to do it on a budget.
Oh man, yeah. And then my bear hunt, we did that on a budget, and man, it was, there was nothing cheap about it in quality wise. And there's, everybody talks about getting a lease and all that, but I can tell you, man, the ducks don't know to stay on private property, and
That's right.
There's a lot of public land right here in the state of Louisiana that's free for everybody to hunt, and I've the only lease I ever paid for is the lease I got my camp on. That's it.
That's true. We're the same way. We've had, growing up in the rice fields and stuff like that, we had leases and stuff my parents did, but that's, in my opinion, I still pursue public land because, man, you're not limited, to where you could go, and you don't feel obligated. I tell people that all the time. You don't feel obligated to stay in one area. Okay, I'm paying, $7,000 for this blind here. If I don't hunt it, I feel guilty. Even though there's no birds or it's not holding the amount of birds or whatever it may be, you still feel obligated, to hunt it because you paid for it. So in public land, you could move around, you could bounce around, go where go where the birds are, go where you want to go, and at least you don't have that financial obligation, I guess. Yeah.
I used to, probably about just at the time that I got into taxidermy, a good friend of mine, he passed this year, but his name was Greg Andrews, and Greg owned Catahoula Lake Guide Service. So when he would have overflow, he got a lot of people in from all over the country, and a lot of times he would have overflow, and he wouldn't have enough. He'd have more clients than guides, so he'd give me a call. He's like, "Hey, Chet, you mind, man, bring your boat? I got some clients. I'll pay you $300 for the day." Man, I'm taking people duck hunting and I'm making money. It was fantastic.
I'm telling you, you get to play guide for a day and make some money and hunt ducks. They don't get better than that, Chet.
I did it for a week and I made some money, man. I did it for a week and the guys would tip me and all. and I'm a pretty good duck caller. So, and there wasn't a day that people didn't leave without a limit, because Greg knew Catahoula Lake, and he would put us, he had blinds all over the place.
Yeah, he knew where the birds were.
Oh, he knew where the birds were, and it come with a lot of work too, because a lot of times we had mobile, we had float blinds, so we would after the clients had finished their hunt, we would move. A lot of times we'd move the blinds to a different area, so we'd do afternoon hunt for some other clients. So we had to pull, 200 or 300 decoys, move the blind and set it all up in one day. And it was a lot of work, Yeah. But man, when the client's leaving and they've had a great day and we're plucking ducks and shooting shit,
better than that.
Man, it doesn't. And I really enjoyed it. And Greg was a Vietnam vet, and he was a little bit younger than my dad, and he got cancer and he deteriorated pretty fast and went. Man, I learned so much from duck hunting from him, and just like particularly on this was one body of water, but when you had a front coming through, you hunted the day ahead, or where the ducks would be working on this conditions, the ducks would be working here on this condition, the ducks would be working there.
He knew it.
Oh man, he knew it, and he and if he'd never take advantage of anybody, because unhappy customers are not repeat customers.
That's exactly right.
He would call people. People would call him, "Hey, I want to come down. I got a weekend, whatever," and he would say, "Nah, don't come down. Conditions aren't right. We haven't been seeing too many birds." So when birds would show up, he'd start calling people and getting them in and
down here or get up here.
It was great. I really liked working with the guy, and in fact, my Alaska hunting buddy, that's how we met. Was he was guiding for Greg, I was guiding for Greg, and we just hit it off. And he brought his wife back there to Prince of Wales Island, and she killed her first bear last year.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was, and it's a little different up there. Everybody thinks, oh man. We're go up to Alaska, it's going to cost a bundle of money and all that. It's just like down here, man. You can go to Gaydon and stay in a fancy lodge and all that, and take you out. You're going to spend more than you'd spend in Arkansas.
That's right. That's exactly. You can spend it. Hey, if you got money, there's a lot of places willing to take it that you can spend it on. That's for sure.
Yeah. But it can also, Alaska can also be as cheap as you want it too, because they're, I think in Louisiana, it's like out of state license, like 300. There's 250. And
cheaper.
Yeah. And they don't have a bow season and a rifle season. They've just got hunting season. Now, if you want to use a bow, you use a bow. If you want to use a rifle, you use a rifle.
Makes sense. I mean, they keep it simple.
Yeah. It's, there is deer hunting up there. There's a lot of ducks you get up there that you don't get down here.
Yeah, it's on my bucket list to get up there.
Get a king eider. Yeah, go up there, up in the Aleutians, and you get these king eiders up there, and
harlequin, all your sea ducks that are crossing the Bering Sea. That's all fascinating to me. Trust me. Me and Jackson and my youngest son, we said once he gets old enough, that's on our bucket list. We want to make that trip.
I had a guy call me and asked me if I'd ever mounted one, and I said no. I've mounted thousands of ducks. I said, but I've never mounted one. I'm just honest with the guy. I said, bring it in, I can mount it for you. And I'm not sharing on. I try to keep my prices low because that's not how I make a living.
Yeah, it's a hobby type situation, kind of.
Yeah, it's a hobby type situation, and a lot of
extra spending money, work on the camp, take a trip to Alaska, do that type of stuff like you mentioned.
That's it, and I kind of make my money up. I kind of make the difference up on the number of ducks that I mount, and so I try to keep, because you got guys out there, they're not making too much money at work.
Yeah.
They're in a financial situation, but they got a duck they want to mount. And I do that for them. Because I think everybody should have that. Some people, I think prices are a little high. But everybody has to kind of make their set, what their time is worth.
Correct.
And
That's a good point.
I'd never mount, if a taxidermist charges $400 or $500 for a duck, that's their business, and I'm not going to say they shouldn't be charging that much money, but I know how much my time is worth to me, and I kind of do it in my extra time anyway. So, I do a lot of work for guys like that. Guys that pull up and their truck. I'm thinking, man, how you keep that thing on the road?
That's right. That's right. And we've all kind of been in that situation at some point, probably.
And why shouldn't he be? I can do it at a price that he can afford.
Yes.
And
why make it affordable for everybody?
I'm making it affordable for everybody, and
that's awesome.
I think that's just as important as getting what you want. I mean, some people say, well, if he does it cheap, it's a cheap result. Well, the only thing that makes a cheap result is, if you brought me a duck that's got 500 holes in it,
That's right. Yeah, makes it harder for me to work on too.
Yeah, and then you kind of, in the end, you get what you brought me, But
right.
I think that just because I don't charge a lot doesn't mean
the quality's any less.
Yeah.
Sure, man. Well, Chet, thank you so much, man. I have enjoyed this. I hope you guys are watching this, whether you're on YouTube, on our channel right here on YouTube, or Facebook Live. Hopefully, Chester was able to answer those questions for you guys. I know I had a blast, man. Thank you so much for coming on. And we're going to have to do this again, man. We're going to have to talk more. We can probably delve into a lot of different topics. You have a lot of history, a lot of knowledge. And I look forward to continuing talking to you, buddy. And
anytime.
I got a bird I need to get to you. I know I've been putting off. I got to do it. But just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us. And let people know how they can reach you, Chester, as far as reaching you. If they're interested in you doing some taxidermy work for them, what's the best way to reach you?
Well, I'm on Facebook. And let's see, how am I on Facebook here?
It's Chester McDonald. Is it your personal account?
Yeah, it's my personal account. And just send me, it'd be Chester McDonald. And you'll see me. I'm holding one of my grandkids. We went over there to the mall where they've got the aquarium and all that. So we took our picture in front of there. And I'll probably change it after this and just put me with some mounts or something like that. And just send me a Facebook request or send me a message on Facebook, and I'll be happy to answer any of your questions and all that. I've done ducks that have been in the freezer for 10 years. That's the oldest bird I ever mounted. Was a guy had it in the freezer. It was the last duck the guy's dog I was telling you about. He had a dog that had died, and it was the last bird that the dog had retrieved. And he had this dog longer than he had his wife, so it meant a lot to him. And man, I started skinning it out, and the skin was so delicate. I had to do it all in one day.
Wow.
Skin it, treat it, mount it, and leave it to dry and inject it and everything.
You had to get it done.
I did it in one day, and it came out beautiful. And the guy cried big alligator tears.
That's awesome.
When he saw it, I said, "Man, I was glad to do that for you." And but yeah, I'll put some amounts on there and all. And I used to have a website, but the price just kept climbing and climbing and climbing.
Oh yeah.
I was getting all my referrals through Louisiana Sportsman. I used to run an ad on there, but Facebook has by far been how people have been able to reach me.
Social media, that's changed the game for everybody now, whether it's good or negative, I guess you could say.
Yeah, sometimes it sucks, and sometimes you get some guys on there. You put a beautiful mount up there, and they just it looks like crap, blah, 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 and they're just tearing you down and all, So it's,
armchair taxidermist at that point, I guess.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
You see it all over the place.
You see it all over the place. But guys, you heard him say you could reach out to him on Facebook on his page if you're interested in Chester doing any kind of taxidermy for you, especially ducks. He's done a lot of ducks. It sounds like that is his expertise when it comes to it. But reach out to him, let him know you heard about it right here at Last Stop Waterfowl. You saw him on the podcast. You saw him on the YouTube channel.
There's my phone number.
The number 225-402-8011. Once again, that phone number is 225-402-8011. You can reach out to him, guys. But well, Chester, thank you so much, buddy. We're gonna do it again soon, but I've enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you soon, I guess, man. Keep doing what you do. I'll be in touch on the bird I want you to do.
Yeah, because sometimes it's difficult to find off-season topics, to kind of keep that energy going of duck season.
Correct.
It's but it's the off-season where you're cleaning your decoys and you're restringing them and you're doing all these things that makes all these little things helps with your next, when season opens up around, you're not scrounging around.
That's right. You have it all ready to go.
Oh yeah. Well, I enjoyed it. I appreciate you bringing me on and
anytime, man. Anytime. I enjoyed it. Thank you so much. You have a good rest of your Sunday, buddy. Go enjoy that extra daylight we got today.
I will, man. Take it easy.
You take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, guys, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed this podcast episode, we appreciate your feedback. If you're watching us on YouTube, right here on our YouTube channel or on our Facebook page, we appreciate you giving us a thumbs up. Even if you're catching the rerun episode of it, we appreciate that so much. And if you're on YouTube following us, give us that subscribe. We appreciate clicking that subscribe button so that you can be informed anytime we have future podcasts or videos. All our new content coming out to you guys. It really helps motivate us here at Last Stop Waterfowl Outdoors and brings new content, give us ideas to bring you new content. So until next time, guys, this is Jacob with Last Stop Waterfowl Outdoors podcast. We'll see you again soon. Y'all take care and have a good day.